Hello, and welcome to Silicon Alley Podcast. Super excited you could join me today. I'm William Glass, CEO and co-founder of Ostrich, and of course, your host of the Silicon Alley Podcast. Now, on the Silicon Alley Podcast, I talk to entrepreneurs and top performers to understand what it truly takes to grow and scale a business. You'll get actionable advice that you can apply in your own business and life. Now, on today's episode, I sit down with Randall Ledet, a good friend and former colleague. But before I jump into Randall's bio and what you can expect on today's episode, if you have not already, subscribe and follow to the Silicon Alley Podcast so you get notified when a new episode drops every Friday. And if you hear something you like, be sure to share the podcast with others on social media, text, email, or however you prefer so they get the same value that you do. Now, today's guest, Randall Ledet Jr., is a sales executive for Gartner, where he works with leading technology providers to grow and scale their businesses. Randall has achieved Winner's Circle, Gartner's top sales award, every year since joining the company back in 2017. Before Gartner, Randall spent time in the supply chain organizations of UPS and DHL. Randall boasts a bachelor's degree in supply chain and logistics from the University of Houston. Now living in Atlanta, Randall's focus is on continuing to build success in his career, relationships, and life. And so a little context for today's episode. Following the death of George Floyd and truly seeing the reality of Black Americans in our society, I posted on social media that I'd use this platform, Silicon Alley, to be an advocate for people of color. And being a close friend, Randall and I coordinated this episode to tell his story as a Black man building a successful career in corporate America. So we discussed his experience, what drives him, and how Randall's actually overcome some depressive episodes. Randall talks about educating people around how you talk about race and communicate. So really, really dynamic conversation. And I actually remember when Randall first joined Gartner. So I'm happy to be able to share his insights and what has helped him build a successful sales career. So a dynamic conversation. I hope that you enjoy today's episode with Randall Ledet Jr.
You got no time to waste, but still you hesitate. Caught in a circle saying, I'll never leave this place.
Randall, welcome to Silicon Alley Podcast. Super excited to have you on, man. It's been too long since we caught up.
I know. It's been a long time. I miss seeing you around Florida. Very honored and grateful to be a part of the podcast. And I love what you're doing with the show here.
Oh, thanks, Randall. I appreciate it and excited to have you on. And so for context, Randall and I were at Gartner together down in Fort Myers. We're on the same sales team. So it's been a couple years now, I think, since we've last seen each other, but excited to get to sit down with you today.
I almost lose track of the time, even though it's been about a year or so. It feels like whenever we start talking, it's like you never left. So
exactly.
It's like you never left. So.
Well, Randall, I'm excited to talk to you today specifically, and you've had a lot of success in sales and specifically at Gartner. So definitely want to touch on that. We were kind of talking through social media, was specifically around everything that's happened recently with the murder of George Floyd and sort of the social unrest and everything that's going on. And, I really wanted to get your perspective as someone specifically that that I was close with, being African-American and really understanding your experience throughout this sort of everything that's happened. And then just hear your story, man, and how you've been able to achieve success in the corporate world and kind of your journey and all that. So that's really what I want to talk about today, and would love to dive into that as sort of the setting for our conversation today.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. And really, I'm thankful for people like yourself who reached out and want to make sure that, I'm doing good, are open to conversation in regards to what's going on and not necessarily bottling up everything. And happy to talk about some of my success in corporate America thus far. It's definitely a marathon, but it's been a very big blessing to have some success these past few years. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, let's start at the beginning. So talk to me a little bit about that process early on that sort of led you into your career and where you are today.
Yeah, I watching my parents kind of grow up, and we moved from state to state. I think I ended up living in like 7 states before I ended up going to college. I think that it really prepared me to be willing to move for an opportunity. I wasn't necessarily married to Connecticut or North Carolina or anywhere I've lived before. So, what really started with me was just a drive to be successful. Coming from a good home, I wanted to go to a good college and attended University of Houston. I studied supply chain and logistics technology. Very, very passionate about it. I was a member and a VP of the supply chain organization. All my internships came from there. Like major supply chain organizations with like UPS and DHL. And honestly, my professors, they always pointed me in the direction of sales. They always said, hey, I think you have a really good knack of just relationships and talking to people. Like, have you ever considered sales? go to a career fair, go by a few different booths. And at the time, my buddy Brandon Moore actually worked at Gartner. And he was in my LinkedIn inbox, talking to me about the opportunity in Florida. So between that, going to the career fair and talking to them, I did the interview process, and I figured, technology's hot. Why not give it a shot? And my mantra was, move to Fort Myers for a year, see how it goes. And if I like it, stick it out. If not, I can always move back to Texas or somewhere else. And overall, I'm still there. So it's been going good. That's kind of the skinny of it all.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about moving around a lot and how that impacted you. You said that the family moved around for opportunities. Could you talk to me a little bit about how that sort of shaped who you are?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think it definitely helped create who I was. I was originally born in Virginia, but I feel like most people, where they consider themselves to be from, is where they spend middle school and high school. And I moved from Indiana to Maryland for 1st to 5th grade, and then I moved to Connecticut for middle school and high school and a little bit of college. And really, most of our moves were spurred just upon my dad's promotions in different companies. But
Okay.
what was really exciting about it is being able to just kind of see different perspectives. Having my family be from the South and just kind of that slower pace and yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Being from Alabama, you can relate, obviously. And then just being in the Northeast, a little more fast pace, a little bit much different culture. I think it just helped create, who I am as someone who's, got good Southern morals, but like a Northeast drive, if you will, very on it and with it. And just great school systems, so
Yeah.
it's kind of, again, the skinny, but it definitely, I'm just grateful to be able to see different places. So when it came down to where I wanted to live and I had my own funds to do so, it was a lot easier.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, it makes sense. And yeah, being able to have that perspective of, that Southern culture, as well as experience what it's like living in the Northeast in Connecticut and growing up sort of the latter part of formative schooling there. So
Yeah, it's just a lot of cool things. It's something that most people don't know, but I was in drama club in middle school. So
okay.
Being so close to New York City, we used to go to Broadway every year. So like just experiences like that, being able to go to Yankees games, just kind of seeing the old Yankee Stadium, just historic New York City landmarks, seeing the Empire State Building or, I'm trying to blank here.
Yeah, those are
Statue
big
of
New York
Liberty.
ones. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just, it really is, it was really cool to be that close. Most people I talk to from the South, like even from my own family, they've never been to New York City, like, oh, the big city. And it's like, it was right in our backyard, it's only an hour and a half away. So
Yeah.
it was really, really cool.
How was that? So interesting. I didn't know that about you, about the drama club and doing that. How has those experiences, those cultural experiences, like impacted you and your interests and who you are and all that stuff?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's definitely, growing up, you always hear like, oh, you're big. Like for the viewers here, I'm 6'6", by the way. And, I was always, told that I should be playing sports, or everywhere I go, people are like, oh, you must play a sport. And I was actually someone who just had diversified interests. I used to play the saxophone. And I really liked the idea of just acting and kind of like doing it. So we did a few plays with the Oz. I think one year we did High School Musical. So ironically, I was on the basketball team for the High School Musical as a backup guy. I wasn't Corbin Blue, but I was in there. But I think it helps you get comfortable in front of a stage, and it helped me just kind of meet more of my student body in middle school. And I mean, again, just who I am. I've always been someone who's social and friendly with everyone. So I think it was just kind of cool to like have different groups of friends between the band and drama club and middle school football and high school football. So
Yeah.
Looking back, you're really helping me reflect on how diversified my school experience was and as a byproduct of growing up where I grew up. So
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Being exposed to different arts and, music, being close to New York and all that stuff, it definitely shapes who you are.
yeah.
I'm curious, what led you then in college to decide to pursue supply chain? Because, I don't really think of many saxophone playing actors in supply chain. You think more, just logistics, very logical type thinking. So talk me through sort of that interest and how you ended up in Houston, specifically studying supply chain.
Absolutely. So I think it's kind of it's a combination of what's going to be lucrative versus like what I would find interesting.
Okay.
As you've probably heard, people say to pursue your passion or pursue your dream. And, I can't sit here and say I'm extremely passionate about what I do, but I do love it. I know that it's going to provide opportunities and opened up doors for things that I probably wouldn't be able to afford to do or would not be able to do if I didn't have the funds that I make. But I think with supply chain, what led me to that was growing up, my dad always worked in it. So he worked for Unilever at the time. He went from an operations manager all the way up to like, heading up distribution centers. And I always just found it interesting just kind of solving puzzles. Like I was the person who would watch like how it's made, and I'd always go by the factory. So Unilever, they make Dove. At one point he worked at the Bertolli and Ragu factory in California. So I was just interested in that, and I felt like it's a challenge. It's solvable. There's always jobs there. So I was like, why not do it? And because if it was up to pure passion, I probably would have been a sports journalist.
Okay.
So I've really loved sports like college football, basketball, NFL, and but overall I just kind of chose the safer route, and somehow I ended up in sales, but nonetheless I chose like a more safer route.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, we can, if you want at the end, we can talk about what you think is going to happen with the NBA playoffs and what this new format looks like.
I would love it. Yeah,
We can practice some of the sports journalism if you want.
Yeah, but I love hear from you. Like, when we kind of talk about your path and like what made you want to go down the podcast / entrepreneurial path.
Yeah, man. I mean, so for me, I think similar to you, like I grew up very, very creative. Like my mom's side of the family they were all entertainers. My grandparents, my grandfather was a comedian. He traveled around the country doing stand up and
Oh wow, I can see that now.
Yeah, exactly. Right. My grandmother was a big band singer. My mom was an actress. My uncle's in the music business. My other uncle on that side of the family ran the Chicago Public Radio forever and still is in radio. So just kind of came from that very sort of that aspect, like you said, that very, I guess, arts-based or creative aspect. And to me, the other side of the family was also very logical. My grandfather ran at one point one of the largest court reporting businesses in the state of Alabama.
Wow.
And, having that blend, I think was just perfect for me from an entrepreneurship perspective of kind of going out there. And I see a lot of similarities in culture in terms of if you're going to be an actor or performer or something like that, like you're essentially an entrepreneur and you are the product and you are everything and you've got to sort of run your business. It's just you, but there's still that same sort of self-starting, self-motivation stuff that goes with building entrepreneurship. And so for me, podcast is sort of the blend of both of those. You get to be creative. I get to sit down and talk to people like you and just hear interesting stories and other people that are doing really awesome things. So, and I get the opportunity to help share those stories too, right? Like I don't know how many podcasts you've been on, but I'm hopeful that this will help share and spread your story too and kind of what your passions are. So
yeah, it's funny. I mean, you end up inspiring people without even really realizing it sometimes. And I can't say I've ever been on any other podcasts, but I listen to a ton, and they're just great. Listen to them in the car, listen to them while you're working out, and just source of information.
Exactly. So that's kind of been my journey here to this point.
And you touched upon, and I can touch back on it. I know you touched upon just kind of like what the journey in terms of moving all these different places in my life, like how maybe, my race and what's going on kind of has played a role in that. I think growing up, and you probably talked to a lot of different people about this, there are stereotypes and there's buckets across all different races or ethnicities or sexual orientations, and I think a lot of the things that I felt like I experienced like younger were never like blatant outright acts of racism. They were just more of like microaggressions, the term that people either love or they hate. And it was just more like, it's like, oh, like why are you doing drama club, or like why are you not on the football field, or like you're going to go to college there, like really, like so stuff like that was the case. But I always just kind of took it on the shoulder and never really thought much of it until I got a little bit older. And all you can do is just do your best and live life.
So yeah, it's one of those things where I guess you may not even, I mean, you probably recognized it, but really reflecting, you say as an adult, what has that process been like? Because I'm sure probably before this, but especially these past few months, you've had a lot of time to reflect on that and think about how those microaggressions, as you say, have sort of shaped, whether you realize it or not, different aspects of your life growing up, career trajectory, all that stuff.
Yeah, I think it definitely shaped how I think about the way I behave, you know, I mean, you might have heard this from a lot of people, but a lot of people will say, hey, like, you don't act black or you don't act this way. And, you know, I felt like when I was younger, I tried to emulate, you know, some of the things that are more stereotypical, like just for no reason. And I started to realize, like, no matter what, people are going to look at me the way they look at me. I might as well just be who I am. You know what I mean? I could be the most articulate, educated, successful person, and they might not view me for my race because I don't act in a stereotype that's really negative for a lot of people, right? So I think I always carried that kind of message with me, and I felt like as I got older, I was less caring about making friends and more about I want friends that are going to like me for who I am, and I'm not going to be the person that they feel they can say certain things around me and it's just going to roll off the shoulder. Not that I'm looking for altercations, it was just more so respectfully checking certain actions. And I feel like that's just kind of like how I've when I reflect, I look back and I seek to educate if certain situations are awkward and not necessarily alienate. You know, like if someone says something that's kind of out of line, it's like seek to understand, educate, get perspectives on both fronts, and you know, and you move on.
That's a great approach. Do you have any examples of instances where you have educated, or I'm just curious what that process has been like? Because I can imagine that and this is just me projecting, but it wasn't easy the first time, especially if, you know,
especially just the environment, right? Like whether it happens in the workplace or it happens from a superior or it happens when you first start college, like in a friend group where you have a lot of good friends and you don't want to necessarily make someone feel like you're different. So I think, I mean, one example, and I would say is, you know, I was in corporate America, and one of my colleagues, they come up to me and they're like, hey, like, you know, I wanted to tell you, like, I just got a haircut from one of your people. You know, it came out really great. You know, like, what do you think? And in my instance, I was just like, I know this person is not someone who has issues with African Americans, as far as I know, right?
Yeah.
So in that scenario, I just said, hey, like, you know, haircut looks great. I just want to kind of clear the air here. Like, I'm gonna be honest, like, I'm a pretty cool guy, but I probably wouldn't address the way you just said what you said in that manner. You know, I'd probably say, hey, I went to a more black barbershop or an urban barbershop or something like that. And, you know, different from where I normally go. And I got a really good haircut, like, you know, and just leave it at that. And when we had the discussion, I explained my perspective. He was like, that makes sense. You know, I was like, your people's very 60s and before. It just doesn't really, it's just really jive well. And I mean, that goes for all ethnicities, whether it's Middle Eastern people or Palestinians or anything of that nature. So that was just one example. It's, again, because you just never know. You don't want to make people, because what you don't want to have happen, and what I think is going on a lot is this cancel culture, or, you know, people feel like they can't say anything. So it's like, say what you say, and then you provide education and reason. And if it's understandable, you know, you think you should be in an understanding that this is not okay, and here's how I'll change going forward.
Yeah. No, thanks for sharing that story. And I think you hit a really good point that we don't want people to shut down and then not have any conversation at all. Right. And so it's, you know, the way that you approach it, I think, is really important when you're talking about race. And especially if, you know, we're just not, especially, and I'm talking from the white perspective, just not comfortable talking about it.
Exactly. It's things that, I mean, you've always heard, like, you don't talk about religion, you don't talk about politics. And right now race is being put in this politics bucket. And it's, you know, it's a conversation that people don't normally have. So the last thing you want to do is, the minute people start talking about it, just make people feel awful, you know, or go on full on attack or a defense mode. So that's why, you know, I like to be a voice in the middle somewhere where, if you have any questions, I'm not the voice of the Black community per se, but I can provide my perspective as someone who's been Black. I've never taken it off my skin for 26 years. So I can definitely give my 2 cents.
Yeah. And I think that's another really important point, is that it's like, you wouldn't go up to like one teacher and say, all right, you speak for all teachers, tell me what all the teachers think.
Exactly.
Like, you know, and it's ridiculous to think the same way when it comes to race, and just assume like you can speak from Randall's perspective, what you grew up, your experience, and your experiences, but
my own experiences.
Not like I can speak broadly about, you know, for the entire Black community. So I think that's a really important point that I'm glad you brought up.
Of course. So, I mean, it always interesting. So
yeah. So can you tell me a little bit about being in corporate America specifically? So you gave that one example. I'm just curious, like, what's your experience being one of the few African Americans in corporate America, and how do we start to solve this problem of, you know, getting more equity and bringing in other people of color?
Yeah, so I mean, I can speak from my experience. You know, I think working at Gartner now, and I have previous corporate experience at other firms, like, so for example, UPS and DHL and Emerson out in Texas. I think the way you address the diversity piece is really it depends. It starts with HR, right? HR ultimately brings in people and based upon certain roles. So when it comes to entry level hiring, it starts with what schools you go to, what programs you go to, what majors you're going after. So Gartner's doing a good job of late to go to more HBCUs. You know, but there's also other really diverse schools. So like University of Houston, for example, second most diverse school in America. So there are a plethora of different ethnicities. Like I think it's like 30% white. I think it's like 20% Mexican, maybe like 10% black. And it might be like 12% Asian. So that's step one for our entry level position. I think when you go upper level in the career, I think it's just more of a focus on having more anti-bias measures in place when you are hiring, and then just really putting a big focus on diversity, right? Looking at the benefits in terms of the creativity it brings to the room, the overall just the view of how it looks, and just giving other people opportunities when they're qualified will go a long way. And I think a lot of times most corporations hire based upon people that they can relate to, and you might not necessarily always relate to someone who looks different than you, but you can definitely coexist and find good ideas and ultimately be innovative with others who don't look like you. And in reality, you're doing a lot in corporate America by hiring someone who looks different than you, who's still qualified for the spot, just not necessarily who looks just like you. So that's how I would approach that. Working at a company that, you know, I am in the minority, I think growing up in Connecticut and my high school and my middle school realistically being like 1% black. I mean, I probably graduated with maybe, I would say like 10 black people in my grade, and then half of them were from the Hartford Exchange program, so they weren't even from my town. I think it made me easier to transition into a company like Gartner. I think that if you grew up in a more diverse setting, it'd be tougher just because you don't have a lot of people who look like you. But in terms of my overall work, I felt like it wasn't as inhibitive of my success. There's just certain things you do in corporate America when you're at work versus when you're not at work, you know, and people call it like code switching, if you will, like changing, you know, your vernacular a little bit, being a little more clean, crisp, and just kind of just, you know, being more with the flow. Like we're not going to be listening to Roddy Ricch. We're going to be listening to the Beatles. Like it's kind of just, or, you know, or Katy Perry, which is fine. You know, I mean, that's just kind of more of the top 40 music, but overall, it really hasn't affected me too much. I feel like a lot of African Americans, and myself included, you got to really give 110%, and you got to make sure you're on. And, you know, the slip ups that may be afforded to your colleagues, you don't feel like they're always afforded to you. It's a more qualitative, I guess, point to come at versus the quantitative, but it's just how a lot of people feel that don't have a lot of people in the room that look like them. They have to be a go-getter. They got to be doing more than just getting by. So I'm curious, that's got to be exhausting, right? I mean, to some degree, to be held to this different standard, or even if it's just holding yourself to another standard, like it's got to be exhausting. Yeah, you know, and again, from my perspective, I feel like it can definitely be exhausting. You know, I think that it also allows you to continue to be successful. So I look at it from 2 points, you know, but it is tiring, you know, and it's something that it's there. I think it's there. I mean, again, it's my word versus someone else's, but I mean, a lot of people are on my side, and I think it's there. And I think it's changing though. I think it's different with different leadership. I think it's different with different organizations. Like organizations are culture, teams are culture.
Absolutely.
And that's not, again, anything that in my past work experience, my current work experience, just in general, right? Like your middle school football coach is a lot different than your high school football coach. Your middle school basketball coach is different than your middle school baseball coach. And, you know, like depending on what they enjoy and what they like ultimately dictates how you feel from a comfort level underneath them.
No, it's a really good point. You know, it's all going to be contextual based on the culture and the experience and the people that are in the room, because ultimately the culture is made up of the people. And so even if it is this instance where you are people of color are a very small minority in a group, there's a way to be inclusive with, even if you haven't haven't been able to bring in as many diverse folks as you would like.
Exactly.
So I think that's a really good point.
Exactly. And I think it's just about the approach, right? Being genuine, like doing it because you want to, not just for numbers, doing it because it's really going to make an impact to the organization is what I like to see,
Yeah,
So.
Absolutely. So Randall, what are some of the roadblocks that you've overcome and related to race or just in general in terms of getting to where you are and being in a successful sales role and taking on more and more responsibility as the years go by? Talk to me a little bit about, some of the roadblocks, challenges that you faced in your life.
Absolutely. When I think of some of the roadblocks that I've faced, a lot of them will start off with just the mental, being in the right headspace to be successful, being in the right headspace to just give it your all every day. I'm someone who just transparently has suffered from depression and anxiety before. Coming into my sales role at Gartner, I honestly had like really bad social anxiety. So I really wanted to use this opportunity. I knew sales, you had to be on the phone a lot. You had to be conversating. Like, I'm going to get back to my old self, that was a big hurdle for a position where you're learning all new information. You're trying to sell and you're selling, premium solutions. So I think that I had to overcome that feeling of being comfortable, being uncomfortable, from a mental and a physical perspective and being in a new environment. So I think that was one of the biggest obstacles, coming into corporate America the way I did in a location, like that. I think just other roadblocks in life, the majority of them have really just been from mental. Like even in college, I at one point, even though I put some of the weight back, I lost about 80 pounds my freshman year. And my issue, and sometimes I still struggle with this, is just like eating for pleasure versus eating for your needs. And I had to really battle and make a stance in my head that like, okay, I'm going to eat the right foods, I'm going to do the right activities, and I'm going to be disciplined about this. And as a byproduct, the success was losing the weight. So in all of this, what you'll hear is just that a lot of times it's just like identifying the problem, being disciplined, acting on it, and just letting the results flow, whether for good or bad.
Yeah, no. And I'm appreciate you for getting vulnerable there and talking about, depression and some of those things. What was that like going through those episodes and getting yourself, into a better headspace?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's something that, I definitely support the mental health community. It was a very dark place. I think a lot of people that fall into that, they're the people you wouldn't expect. I think you look at some of these suicides, and I'm drawing blanks on the names, but it's like people that are very bubbly, like happy. You would never expect it, right? And I was always someone who's really social and outgoing and happy in college, and just had a really tough bout, and some of the feelings were just like remorse and just dark feelings, like waking up like I don't want the day to start, or like why do I have to go get lunch? Like I don't want to eat. And as someone of my stature, I like to eat. So it was really, really tough, and just through that, you put a really strong strain on your family, because you're dragging them down with you. But I think focusing on counseling and really more so what I'm taking in, like health-wise, energy-wise, like music, all of that really helped me rebound, and having success in your career helps as well. But also realizing that you can't attach your career success to your value was important for me as well. As someone who was very career-driven in college, like had 3 internships in 3 years, like that was always something that I identified with myself. And I think that coming into a new role in a new state, already having those feelings of being down and not seeing immediate success could really put you in a rough spot. But it's just really about focusing on what you can control and taking in good food, taking in good material, music, and getting the help you need, going to the doctor. And it doesn't necessarily always have to be medical in terms of medications, but just putting in good in your body and working it out and getting vitamin D and sunlight was really key, and it's really helped sustain me today. Which it's a tough road when you're down there, because you just feel like you never imagine yourself being there, and you feel like you're never gonna get out sometimes, because it's like, why is my brain thinking like this? Like why? Like I don't understand. Like I'm someone who's social, outgoing, and usually happy. Like why am I not happy? So it was really, really tough, but here to tell the story.
Well, thanks for sharing. And I think that you're spot on in terms of just controlling what you can control, what you're putting into your body mentally, physically, emotionally, and having that support is just, it's huge. And, you know, I'm thinking back, cause I was there when I was on the, you know, we were on the same team when you first joined Gartner, like, you know, and looking back on it, I can see some of that, you know, like I remember that. And like, you know, today, like it's night and day from like when you first joined, and some of that you know, is obviously just getting acclimated, but you know, I'm curious from an advocacy or like a standpoint, you know, what can other people do if they start to see a coworker or a friend or colleague that's starting down these episodes? Like, what advice would you have in terms of support? Like, what would you have wanted?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, and I think, you know, I think I got a lot of support from my roommate at the time, Jan Daniker. You know, he was always there, like, hey, if you need anything, I could help cook tonight, or, you know, like you can talk to me in confidence. Like that's really helpful, having someone you can talk to in confidence, because it's really tough to be vulnerable about these things because there is a stigma. It doesn't make you crazy, you know, if you go through these type of bouts, but by removing that stigma, it makes people more comfortable talking about it, and which makes it more times easier to get out of that situation. Because usually if you feel like you're alone, not only are you sad now, but you're alone. You have no one to talk to, and
you're in your own head.
Yeah. So for friends or colleagues or associates that notice that and they feel comfortable, I think just a quick check-in, like, hey, like how you doing? Like how's life? Like how are things going? Like what have you been doing for fun? Like, you know what I mean? Like, are you still like, if that person likes to ride motorbikes, you know, it's like, are you still riding bikes? Like, you still catching up with such and such, you know? And I think if you notice that they're not doing the normal activities, or they just kind of seem very short, that could be one of the reasons why that is. And I think just being there and being supportive, and even if they lash out on you, you know, not necessarily taking it personally. Yeah, I think that happens sometimes too, just because they're going through a lot, you know, and just overall just being a listener and being supportive is all you can do. And I think it goes a long way.
Yeah. Yeah. Being able to, have someone be that ear, that voice, or be that ear that you can, like an
empathetic voice, not like a judgmental, you're not eating the right foods, or you're not, you know, you're not trying to make yourself better. Like, what the heck, you know? Yeah. So, you know, just kind of being more supportive, like, well, why don't you take one step, you know, make your bed tomorrow morning, or, you know, open your window early, something like that. So,
yeah, no, I love that. Yeah. That's great advice, Randall. Yeah. And I'm curious, you've had a lot of success at Gartner, hit winner's circle the last, 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
And for those that aren't familiar, that's like President's Club. It's the big sales thing. So it's the top salespeople in the company that hit that. And so you've obviously had success. You mentioned that one of the things that was important was separating career success from overall life success, getting out of sort of these down episodes mentally. How do you define success today?
Yeah. So, you know, the way I define success today, and I was excited to see this question on the sheet, is, you know, I look at it from personal life, career. Have you seen Zig Ziglar's like wheel? It's like eight different categories. Things like money, financial success, spiritual success, you know, relationship success for your family, your friends. My girlfriend, I'm really happy to be with, Gabriella, and just those different categories. And I think in order to strive for success, because it's kind of always a moving needle, it's just making progress each day, each week, every hour, you know, but not necessarily stressing yourself out, but just putting a focus on getting better. And ultimately just having those short-term and long-term goals. So for me, you know, long-term, I want to be able to retire, be successful, be in a position where I can retire early, from a relationship perspective, you know, and I want to be with someone that's going to make me happy. And I am right now, long-term, you know, and just from a career perspective, just continuing to not only be successful in my line of work, but helping others on the side. Like right now I help with recruiting, or being able to be a mentor for other associates, or a mentor for children, you know? It's kind of like a roundabout answer, but really it all kind of boils down to just helping myself and helping others.
Okay. How do you track that? And I don't know, is it just like, you know, you said, feel like you're making progress every day, every hour, whatever it is, but how do you track that without putting unrealistic pressure on yourself?
Yeah. So the way I track it is just kind of like Getting started. Like you can ask my girlfriend. I write down my goals typically once a week.
Okay.
I have like the 8 different categories. So work and career, family, and I just kind of put like micro goals within that. So not
Okay.
stressing myself out, but like making sure I call my parents once a week. It sounds small. Some people call their parents every day, but you can get lost in the day to day, and you kind of just forget about
Yeah.
your friends, forget about everything because you're just tired or whatever. So like I make mini goals for connecting with family. I make a goal to like read a Bible verse or so at least twice a week. I want to get that back to going back to church or listening to church. But it's a little bit different virtual versus being in the actual house of the
Absolutely.
Lord. From a mind intellect perspective, I try to meditate, at least once a day or once or twice a week. And I'm not perfect. Like I go through hills and valleys, but the key things that I really put a big focus on is just being physically active. So some days I'll lift and run, some days I'll just go for a walk, but I'm moving. I'm
Yeah.
doing something towards that. And overall, just from a tracking perspective, just making lists, honestly. And then once I feel like I've hit a pillar or I plateaued, then I add more to that list,
Okay.
within the balance of what that week or that month or that quarter looks like. So that's kind of how I track it. How about you?
Yeah. Yeah. So interesting question. I've always been asking it and I haven't really answered it. I get the benefit of hearing how everyone else answers it. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's leaving like having an impact that moves things forward for whether it's just one person, whether it's for a group of people, whether it's for, the whole world, just having some sort of impact that helps people improve. And I think it starts with yourself, as you mentioned. If you're, like if you were in a depressive episode, or you're just not, I'm not feeling good about myself, it's hard for me to be there for other people, though sometimes that is the answer.
Yeah,
Is
it's true.
helping other people
That's
and
true. Yeah.
actually get you in the right mindset. So
Hmm.
I think for me, that's how I define it. And what the podcast and Ostrich are both examples of that. The podcast for me is I get to sit down and have really great conversations with, people like you, Randall, and, just awesome guests that share their experiences and help provide knowledge and stories. Cause I think that we learn from hearing other stories and can relate to, other people and their experiences.
Hmm.
So for me, that's what this whole podcast is about. And then Ostrich for me is about changing the way that we interact with money. Cause I think that there's just there's just so much that we tie into money and career and success in that regard that, as
Hmm.
you mentioned, doesn't really translate into actual happiness. And there's, at the same time, it's such an important thing. It's a great tool,
Yep.
and we don't equitably give people the right tools. We don't have the system set up properly, in my opinion, to
Right.
really support everyone and help everyone. And that's why you can see, 17-year-olds that sign on for $200,000 in debt and end up, majoring in,
Art.
old English philosophy or something. I don't know,
Yeah.
and like, not that if you love it, that's great, but you know,
It shouldn't
is it,
it shouldn't be easier to sign up for student loans than it is to get a loan for a business.
yeah, exactly. And then there's so many people, and at Gartner and just in general, I talk to that are especially our age, that are in their 20s and 30s, that have so much debt that they might have the best idea for a company that could absolutely change the world or be super passionate about something, but they can't go do it because they have to bring in a paycheck to pay off student loans that they're going to be paying for the
Exactly.
next 30 years.
Exactly. And I'm excited for that part of this conversation. Money is something that I'm definitely I've done a good job of accumulating, but I want to always continue to get better at managing it. And resources like yourself and books and honestly my parents
Yeah.
are all important, but it's just interesting because it's no different than anything else in the success wheel. It's about what you actually do. You can know what to do, but if you don't do what you have to do, then you're not going to be in a good spot financially. So, and I loved your success answer, because the best part about it really is that you're looking to impact others. Like, you can impact others in your job, you can impact others in your day-to-day, just having conversations. And it's not necessarily married to one career route or one life route. You know,
Yeah.
there's so many different things that people do that impact people. There's the J.K. Rowlings of the world. There's the Jeff Bezos of the world. You know, he
Yeah.
impacts me every day when I get my packages. So
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
And I think that's a really good point. Like J.K. Rowling, someone writing a book that ends up turning into this series that turns into this movement that turns this whole world that has
yeah,
positively impacted people. And oh man, actually, there's something that I was either reading or watching that was talking about how like those types of stories help us with like there's a lot of undertones of like relationships with people and like love and like all those types of things that
yeah.
underlie a
In those
story
type of
about a
books.
wizard
Yeah,
that
and you don't even realize it sometimes. It's crazy.
exactly. And that like every sort of generation has their own series. There's Lord of the Rings, and you keep going back in time and you can see these types of concepts play out
Hmm.
for generations that go with those stories. So that's really, I'm glad that you brought that up. It's not just who can go build the next Amazon, but
Right. It's a plethora of things. I mean, whoever wrote Hamilton, they just recently had a Hamilton tour across the nation, and
yeah,
people get their tickets, they bring their significant others, their kids. Like, it's bigger than just starting a big business for sure.
yeah,
It really
absolutely.
is. It really
So
is.
you started touching on this, Randall, the finance piece. How would you describe your relationship with money?
I would describe my relationship with money as, ooh, it's a heavy question. um,
There's no wrong answer. It's your relationship and it can always be evolving, but
I think it's I'm looking for like one word to define it. I'm just not married to it. I find it really important, and it's something that I metric a lot of my efforts towards. But from a spending and saving and financing and maneuvering it in the best way, it's a learning experience. Like, I'm good at saving. I want to be better at moving it around in the right ways to be successful in regards to the market. That's
okay.
that's that's not really like the way to define it. I feel like it's a learning experience, but
Yeah.
um,
Well, it sounds like you've got a good relationships in terms of being able to accumulate and save, and now you're looking at the sort of growth. What can I do
mhm,
with my money
mhm.
so that, as you said, your goal of retiring early, you don't have to work forever, and you can let your money do some of the work for you.
Exactly, and it's something that I think with my father, like, 'cause I'll probably reference him a lot in the podcast today. He's someone that, he grew up a lot differently than me, so he wasn't as I guess, like, privileged, if you will, in terms of the funds that we had and what that provided.
Sure.
Growing up in a house of 6 kids, so I feel like he put a big focus on what he did with his money, and he just put a big focus on being financially savvy, like learning a lot, like, because finance is a language, you know what I mean? Like, as you know,
Yeah.
pretty much. So he really did a good job of doing that. He always taught me that language. I think I just need to continue to learn more and apply it. And it's a lot. I really think it's a lot, but I think no different than I tell myself to chop up these little mini goals. It's the same thing I need to be done with finance as well.
Yeah. What do you think that next step is? So you said you're learning a lot. Are you focusing on like books and podcasts, or what does that look like in terms of getting to where you want to be?
Yeah,
Uh,
so I think, I mean, education is always important. Learning is important, but I think action is the next thing. I talk to my dad once a week. My girlfriend's dad, actually, he got me. It must have been like a almost walking to the family there, but he got me like a series of books from the Rich Dad Poor Dad author.
yeah.
So
Robert Kiyosaki. Yeah.
yeah. So I've been reading those. I've always had a Roth IRA. I think the next step is really to look more in the stock market. I don't necessarily invest right now, and I know
Okay.
that doesn't sound logical, but I think that's kind of the next thing. I mean, for me, I've always been a little bit risk adverse. I worry about,
Sure.
if I put my money here, like, what's going to happen. But I think you have to do it. We're so young. This is the time where we can make risk, especially when we can live a certain way by our means and use those extra funds towards that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Right. Yeah. With a Roth, it's not like, it's in a retirement account. You're not supposed to touch it for whatever, 30 or 40 years
30, 40
anyway.
years.
So
You can't pull it out till 55 unless you want to incur some funds or some fees, if you will. So
yeah, exactly. So, if you can, yeah, think about it from the long term of how the market goes versus what it's been doing lately, which is just up and down and up and down.
yeah, but I think that's my next step. It's
Okay.
pretty it's simple, but in my head I'm making it complex. So
I gotcha. Randall, what would you say is the best investment that you've made?
best investment I've made, man. I couldn't even tell you. I don't know.
Okay.
What would you say is yours?
I would say the time that I've spent like just reading.
Okay, so we're looking outside of money here. Okay, got it. All right.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
monetary wise, right now, it could change, but right now I'd say the rental property that I bought, but
Yep.
who knows what could happen, right? There's a hurricane headed towards Florida right now. That thing could be underwater. And
I mean, but if you have insurance, you're good.
well, yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully still so, but yeah.
I guess in that regard, the best investment has really been in just taking in knowledge and improving myself, because I feel like if I improve myself, I can give more to others,
Yeah.
investing in health, investing in just meditation probably would be up there, if not close to number one. Just getting the mental right, getting a clear head, to really look at things with the best perspective, to be able to, again, give more of yourself to others. Like, a lot of people don't know this, but I'm kind of like a social introvert, so I like to socialize, and I really do, but I need that recharging time, and those type of activities, the things that I take in, will allow me to be able to provide myself to others.
Yeah. I love that. That focus on that self-care. So
And
you
it's
can
not
be
a selfish thing. It's just more of, if I'm going to be able to be the best for others, I need to like take care of myself.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Yeah. It's not like we get mad at our phone when it runs out of battery, right? We just plug it in and recharge it because we know that
Exactly.
I shouldn't have run it down to zero. And it's kind of like that same thing for yourself. You got to
Yep.
like recognize when your batteries are on zero, and that's why things aren't working right now. You need
Exactly.
that recharge time.
Exactly.
So you don't know you're not like you kind of define your best investment. What about the dumbest money mistake that you've made, Randall?
Man, dumbest money mistake I've made. I mean, I've ran up a credit card pretty bad in college. Got a $2,000 limit. I mean, I probably spent it in like 3 months, just like stupid stuff, eating food, going to the mall, just to move to Houston, going out to the bar, like stuff like that. I think that was probably the stupidest mistake.
Okay.
And my dad was like, "What are you doing?" So I would say that was probably my worst investment. And in hindsight, it was one of those things, like, I knew what I was doing. I just was like, I'm young. When I cross the bridge, it'll be there. But those type of things really do affect you. And I know it just was really dumb,
Yeah. Yeah. And see, that's something that someone should have sat you down in freshman 101 or whatever it was.
And they're like,
and
if you can't afford to pay this, do not do this.
Yeah. Treat it as a debit card, not a credit card.
Yep. Just because you got approved does not mean it's yours.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's learning experience for sure. I mean, again, going back to the best investment piece, I mean, I think going to University of Houston was a really good investment too. Just the people I was able to meet. I'm really still close with my supply chain professor. He actually ran the organization, ran the supply chain curriculum, if you will, Daniel Kassler. It was just a wealth of knowledge in terms of opportunities, and just the people that he connected me with that allowed me to be connected to others. The people I met at University of Houston, some of my best friends to this day, that have gone in different walks of life. So again, you might not know this about me, but I went to 3 different colleges. So I went to play football in freshman year in upstate New York. Then I transferred back to Southern Connecticut in New Haven to get my grades up. Fun freshman year. And then, I really put a big focus and went to U of H, but I wanted to use that time to grow. And I feel like I paid more to go there, but I was around family because my family's from Texas originally.
Yeah.
And I was in a curriculum and in programs where it helped. It was just a good investment. Like, I look at the cohesive experience, and it's like I'm getting everything. I get the sports, I get good friends. I was able to do student journalism there, so I was a part of the student TV network. I met some really cool people doing. I worked for the Woodlands Monocle in Woodlands, Texas, so outside of Houston. We used to do interviews with the Texans. I was able to interview an Olympic swimmer, actually, who was from the Woodlands. So just things that like allowed me to just to like get planted and get rooted. And it costs a pretty penny to go to school there, but I think that it helped me grow after high school, and a lot of growth from a racial perspective, being in that, going from a predominantly white high school to a really diverse college in a very diverse city, in a bigger city compared to Sulington, Connecticut. So.
Yeah. No, yeah, those are very different experiences for sure.
Very, very different. So you go from one of the smallest towns to the 4th largest city in America. So.
Yeah. Night and day there.
Yeah.
So, Randall, What advice would you give to someone else that was just starting out, that was driven, like that maybe wanted to go into sales, interested in supply chain, someone similar to yourself? What advice would you give that person?
The advice I would give them is to really lean in on educating yourself on each opportunity that you pursue and that you're interested in. Like, do your homework beforehand. Do your homework during the process if you're interviewing. Take a big focus on understanding who is interviewing you, what company, and then when you find yourself in a position to make a decision, look at the company values that you're looking to work for, and see if those align with you. And those might always change, right? I mean, if you're coming out of college and you got one offer, you're going to take that job. But if you find yourself in a position where you have the opportunity to have multiple offers in multiple locations, or just multiple offers in one location, like, look at the company values, look at the upward mobility time track, like what is the next step in your role, and see if that's something that you would want. Like, if you're doing it just for the money and it's something you'd like, you're probably not going to be happy. But really, just overall educate yourself, and then once you get into the role, do everything you can within reason. Don't drive yourself crazy, but just be hungry, be a sponge, be someone who's willing to learn. Raise your hand for opportunities, and be a continuous learner. You're going to have to work past 5 o'clock to be good at whatever you are doing, whether it's your first job or your second job or your third promotion. Chances are you're taking on a new challenge and a new skill or new skills with new complexities that require you to give more than just the 40 hours. And whoever else is at that level is probably put in more than 42. So I think it's important to work hard once you're there. And if someone is looking at sales or supply chain, again, I think there's so many different realms. There's different positions within supply chain. You can work marine supply chain. You can work like air supply chain. You can work for supply chain for Nike. You can work for supply chain for like a DHL, and even for sales, there's tech sales. There's more tangible sales. Like I sell information and access to insights. There's technology sales. There is tool part sales. Figure out something that you can see yourself doing, and look at the company values. Look who you're going to be working with, and see if you're going to get along well with them, and then give it your all once you're there.
Yeah, it's great advice.
Yeah.
What
about you? I keep throwing it back on you, but you were always someone I looked up to a little bit, so I want to hear what you have to say.
Well, I appreciate that compliment, Randall. Yeah, I think one of the biggest, not mistakes, but assumptions you make, at least I made, and this is from experience, is that you have to have it all sort of figured out. Like, whatever you pick your first job out, or whatever you pick is kind of it.
This is your path.
Yeah.
Like, take it or leave it. This is it.
Because that's kind of what at least how I was taught in school, is like, you got to find a career path, like go be an attorney and you're going to be an attorney forever, or go to medical school and you're going to be a doctor forever. But I think it's really important to think about what it is you actually want. And obviously this is going to be different depending on situations. If you're in, like you said, if you're in a situation where you're graduating and you have a lot of student debt and you've only got one job offer and you've got to take it because you've got to take it, that's a different situation. But I think even in that situation, taking a step back and thinking about, like, what is it that I'd really want to do? Like, you know what? I really loved playing the saxophone and being in drama or sports journalism. What I want to do is I want to go see if there's something that connects these things. Mm-hmm. And even if it's not your dream job, whatever it is, go look into that and go spend time pursuing that, because there's definitely, it may not be exactly what you imagine. And you hear the whole idea of, like, pursue your passion, all that stuff, which I think there's merit in terms of finding something that you love or enjoy and pursuing it. It doesn't necessarily need to be like, I want to just watch Netflix all day because that's my passion, but like, you got to find something within reason. And I think pursuing that specifically and actually taking the time to really think about that, and not letting the other people sort of dictate where you go because you think that's what you should do.
I agree.
If that makes sense.
I know, and I definitely agree with that, and I love it. You connect the dots in terms of something that you're interested in and passionate in, but also is going to be able to help support you. And I was talking to one of my colleagues in my previous division about this. He was interested in working in sports as well. Like, so he was looking at jobs in terms of like marketing analytics or data and analytics for the Sixers, numbers guy, likes to write about sports all the time. Whenever he'd write an article, he'd run it by me, like, "Hey, check it out. What do you think?" And I was like, that sounds like a perfect career. I mean, it's not sales, but I think the hands you're going to shake and the doors that could open by doing that. I mean, you're going to find yourself in the general manager's office at some point if you're doing the right things, or just different cities and opportunities across other NBA teams. And it's cool because he's not playing for the Sixers, obviously, but he is connected. He is in the arena, so you're probably going to be able to go to the games for free, and you're happy. So I think that is really important when someone taking a step back is looking at what they want to do and coming out of that first role or even that second role.
Yeah. No, it's a great story, and yeah, you're spot on. Whichever way it ends up, you may not be playing for the Sixers, but hey, if you're in the arena and you're getting to do something that's related to it and you enjoy it, then that's a win at the end of the day.
And your role's there for a reason. You're making an impact. I mean, more than likely the team can't function without you. I mean, even need the water boy. Everyone's needed.
Yeah, everyone be dehydrated. Yeah, that would work.
Exactly. LeBron's cramping. He can't beat the Clippers. I mean, so you gotta have that water.
Exactly. So I'm interested to get your perspective on this, Randall. What would you say is the biggest challenge facing Americans when it comes to finances?
I think the biggest challenge when it comes to Americans facing finances is also, I mean, I think I said it earlier, but financial literacy. Just being able to be knowledgeable on what is important to invest in or what is not important to invest in, and how do you move your funds in that way, right? Like, I wasn't someone who knew that it made sense early on to invest in property, right? Like, obviously everyone says get a house, but it doesn't have to be a house. It could be like a small home, something just that you own.
Yeah.
And that's going to be worth more than just you renting. So I think Americans, they struggle with financial literacy, and I think they also struggle with discipline, right? You can be taught everything, but you have to do it for it to have an impact. So those are probably the 1 and 2, I would say. I give people the benefit of the doubt in terms of education because it's not something that you're taught in school. We have all these business classes, I mean, you have FBLA in high school. You have all these different like wood shop classes, and God knows I haven't used the slope calculation ever in my lifetime. So, but it's not like there's any financial literacy classes, whether it's in the suburbs where I grew up or more than likely in the inner city where other people grow up. So I think I give people the benefit of the doubt in that capacity. And then the next step is just the action, so.
Yeah. You keep bringing it back to this action. I think that you're onto something.
Because you can learn everything. I mean, like, your manager could tell you what to do. Like, you can say, I don't know what to do for this call, and they tell you what to do. But if you don't do it, you can't sit there and say, I don't know what to do anymore. Either you're not capable or you are choosing not to do it. But the thing is with money is that it's really just a choice. It's not like you're performing. It's a choice. Like, it's what you're going to do with what you have.
Yeah.
Versus just a job or a game where you got to like kick a field goal. Like, you either can do it or you can't. I mean, money, it's you read and you do what you can.
Yeah. I think along those lines, and as you were saying this, Randall, it kind of stuck out to me, is I think that there's also, when it comes to action, this sort of concept of am I going to do the absolute best thing with my money to get the highest return with the least amount of risk? And there's no way to know what that is 100%.
No.
And you can't, you're just not going to get that 100%. This is the exact perfect investment that I should make out of the, hundreds of thousands of investments that I could make.
Absolutely.
So you've got to figure out like what works for you. And I think when you go back to that learning and to the action is like putting in a plan in place that fits whatever your comfort level is, whatever your goals are.
What you're willing to lose in order to gain, right? And having a balanced portfolio, if we're talking more on the investment side, or I guess that's kind of more relates with what you were talking about there. So I think just having that balanced portfolio and understanding what you're willing to put in and what you're willing to lose, and having and keeping a good eye on it,
Yeah.
But it's not as simple as you put this here, you get this out a lot of times.
Yeah, exactly. And I think even if we take it outside of investment and we just look at actions in general, it's thinking about, well, like I could go spend and whatever, go buy this, I don't know, new car, but is that really is that my number one priority, is to have this like nice new car? Or is it, hey, I want to retire early, and which one outweighs the other? Like, is it having this nice new car right now in my 20s, or is it being able to spend time with my kids and grandkids and not have to worry about working and money and being able to support them and myself.
And I think a lot of people grapple with that because of there might be a little lag here, so I know for the recording you'll probably slice this out. But I think a lot of people, they struggle with living in the now. Like, you're young, you want to live now. Like, you don't want to just always save everything and then you look back, you didn't do anything in your 20s, you didn't travel, you didn't go anywhere. But there are definitely some big ticket purchases and certain things that we put our money towards that you could definitely save up and put more towards retirement or more towards things that are going to be more permanent when you're older, and you don't want to be standing on your feet at 55 plus or in an office cubicle. Exactly. Anywhere besides in front of a screen.
Yeah, unless I choose to, because I just want to watch a game today or something.
Yeah, if it's voluntarily, that's fine. My dad, he always tells me, he's just like, yeah, I can stop working today, but if I want to, like, maybe I'll just go work at Home Depot or Walmart, and I'll just greet people and just I'll get paid, and it's nice. So to have that freedom comes with the decisions you make now, and a lot of times the car is not needed, or some of the other big ticket purchase items that people get, or the ball out vacations to Vegas and stuff like that. So
exactly,
you can ball out, you just can't ball out as much as you're balling.
Yeah, just before you ball out, set some money aside for future, some money, and then go ball out with the rest, and then
go ball out the rest of it. Exactly.
Randall, I want to end this one today. Specifically, we talked. It's been a theme throughout this, but when we think about starting to solve some of the systemic racism issues that we have in the U.S., more equality, whatever specific aspect we want to talk about, like, what are your thoughts just in general of how we can, as individuals, start to move the needle and create a more equitable society?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought it back to this. This has been something that has been on my mind a lot this year, and it's not just because of with Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd. Honestly, moving to Georgia and seeing what happened to Ahmaud Arbery was very frightening, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Not only what happened, but how it was treated for those 2 months prior to the footage. And you see the comments about what people say, and they're defending the actions of the criminals, if you will, right? But when it comes to America and this systemic racism or these systemic things that are going on, because people kind of harp away from the racism word, systemic policies challenges inequalities that are in place that are easy to pinpoint but hard to change for some reason. I think where we should start is from a position of empathy and understanding, like understand the history of the nation, like, and just accept it. I saw a Shannon Sharp video the other day, and he's got some controversial points for certain people, but he basically was like, if you think about this country, it was built on a lot of controversy, and it was built on a lot of things that were in favor of certain people than others, and those policies continued to be carried down. And while there were some changes, not all those policies changed, and certain policies were made that, while on the surface don't look bad, but they were made with specific intentions to limit certain people from their opportunities. Like, I didn't even know about the Tulsa burnings in 1921 until this year.
Yeah.
I wasn't really super knowledgeable in regards to, how they zone certain districts, or how there's less voting polls and more urban environments than there is in the suburban environments. Like, little things like that. I think when they're actually identified and pointed out, a position of understanding from people and just like looking at the actual facts would be a first start. Right. Yeah. Not just questioning with blind patriotism and saying, hey, well, this is America. This is the greatest country ever. If you don't like it, then leave. Like, think about it. Like, our ancestors were brought here, and right now America's on this platform where half of them are saying our country's not great, we need to make it better. But then when the other half says, well, here's some things that we can fix, we can leave. That doesn't make sense. So like that whole like leave versus make it better, I think that needs to kind of go away. I think people need to be more understanding and willing to listen and learn. And I think we need political figures who have power to really make an actual push towards reform, and it can't just be lip service. I think it's more reform in regards to where polling stations are, or reform in regards to the funding that goes towards school systems to create a better educated society and allow for more people to have more opportunities to get out of their situations. I think from a police state, I think it's controversial, and I'll dive into it, and I'm talking a lot here, so please feel free to chime in here, but I
Okay.
think there needs to be less of the blind patriotism, and I'll say it again,
Yeah.
towards questioning the authority of what our police members do. I think 90% of police officers are good, 95 maybe, right? But to be in a position where you can't question authority, it's always they're the police, you got to listen to them to do what's right, versus these are people that live in our neighborhoods, that are in our communities. They're people just like us. They just put a uniform on, and accountability is the key to any form of success or change. So why can't we
Yeah.
hold them accountable? And the accountability piece first started with them just taking that position. But if they're not doing the right things without laws in place, then we need to put tougher penalties. When
Yeah.
drugs were an issue in certain communities, they put harsher penalties. Bill Clinton put the 3-strike rule. So like those type of penalties, if needed, should be applied to things going on in terms of police brutality and this systemic piece.
Yeah.
And then on the adjacent side, a culture change. There should be a culture change. There should be more robust training. There should be a more psychological evaluation for who you hire to be in these positions of power that
Yeah.
have a lot of control and stake in the community and in people's lives. You get one charge, and you can't afford to get out of jail. You're stuck there. I've been
Yeah.
watching this story on Netflix about Khalif, I think Brower. He was literally pulled over and charged with, I think, stealing a backpack, and they made his bond $3,000, and his mom couldn't afford it, and he was in jail for 3 years, solitary confinement for 2 of those 3 years because of all the things he went through, and ultimately ended up killing himself
Yeah.
after he got out. So I think to avoid those type of situations from a systemic perspective, looking at the police side, training, culture change,
Yeah.
actual policies and laws in place to create more enforcement and just
Yeah.
empathy across the board. And I think that goes for all these different issues that are being brought up. It's not about just Black people feel like they don't have as much opportunities, or that like we don't have the same opportunities in this life, because we do have a lot of opportunity right now, but there are certain systems in place that are not fair that
Yeah.
should be changed. Like I can probably realistically still be successful without these systems being changed, but there are a lot of people who are not, and I care
Yeah.
about those people as well. No different than when people say, well, there was only like 100 Black people who died last year of police brutality. Like there should be 5, 0. Like
Yeah.
it
Like,
shouldn't even be an only number. It should be no one. If the police are doing their job, they arrest the criminals, they let the judicial system do their job, and then we go from there. So that's long answer short. Those are some of the
yeah.
things that I would apply. And that's just kind of my stance on it. And I hope that with more
Yeah.
empathy and understanding and less of the leave versus stay, we can see some change here in the next few years.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you expanding on all that, Randall. And I think you hit a lot of really important points, and like, and I think empathy is the right word. Is like, everyone has their own experiences, but you've got to be able to look at it from someone else's perspective. And that's the key. Is if you can't do that, and you're not willing to do that as an individual, then you're going to have a really hard time understanding other people just in general, and
Exactly.
why people feel certain ways that they do, and the experiences that if you're not a person of color, like what that must be like. I can reflect back, and like I'm pretty sure that I would 100% be dead if I was a Black person, if from some of the experiences that I've gotten into, like being pulled over by police, for speeding and late at night and stuff like that when I was a teenager. And I can say that with confidence that there's a very high likelihood that I would not have made it if my skin color was different.
Right. Right.
And like, to me,
happens.
reflecting on that is just, it's important. And like, I could be wrong, but based on what we're seeing and what we can actually see physically now from body cam footage and what's out there, like there's very little doubt in my mind.
Yeah. And to your point, it's a blessing that you're here today to tell the story of what's going on. And it's going to take more people like yourself, being honest and open to that perspective, in regards to those situations where you were in that may have been different if you didn't necessarily look the way you look. But I just think that it's a long road, but
Yeah.
I want to leave with this. I tell my friends this all the time, and it's not, I don't think it's controversial, but if you think about all the issues that have happened in the Black community that have been solved, it's always met with resistance. It's no matter what, whether it's freeing the slaves caused a civil war, or
Yeah.
segregation was met with obviously all the different things that revolved around Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks, there was a resistance. It's never like, hey, like, you know what, you guys feel like this is unfair, here you go, right? So I think if you look at history, it should really tell the story of, there shouldn't be a surprise why there's this resistance once again to these issues. And again, you can question that maybe the issue doesn't exist, but if you look at history, every time a cause is brought up by an African American, there has to be protest, there has to be all this change, and there's a very like firm resistance, like people in the streets, riots, protests, the whole nine, versus just saying, you know what, you're right, let's change this. Like that's all. And I feel like that perspective, it makes it a little bit easier to see why things the way they are right now are the way they are. It's not just going to be okay, you want us to change how we police you, all right, that's fine. No, it's just not. So I mean, hopefully that changes with new leadership, or the current leadership that takes on new perspectives. But that's just kind of my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, I like that. I think, I mean, that's a really good point. Yeah, we haven't just fixed the things that we needed to fix. So yeah, I mean, there's we could talk about this, I think, for years. For we would never get to the end of it. But
yeah,
Randall, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story, your experience, and some of the insights that you have, and talking with me today. So I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Will, I love what you're doing with the show. Thank you so much for having me on. Thank you for being open to not just talking about my life, but just talking about what's going on in our community, if you will. And I think you're doing great things, and I'm looking forward to listening to more shows here. So keep it up.
No, I appreciate that. And I want to point this out. I'm glad that you used the word "our." I think that, and right now, part of the problem is, as you go back to the empathy, we use the word, them or they versus us and that type of thing. And I understand why some of that's there, but at the end of the day, like, if we want to solve this, it's our nation, it's our problems. It's not the Black community's problems. It's not the police's problems. It's our problems. That
exactly. And I empathize with everyone's problems. The things that go on with women's rights or with gay rights or anything that's not necessarily just in my community. I consider that our problem. I think that because if you solve those, it makes society better. So that's why I say that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Randall, I'll leave you with the last word. Let the audience know how they can support what you're doing. If you want to give out LinkedIn or something like that, so folks can connect with you if they've got questions or want to talk more after the show. I'll leave you with the last word.
All right. So I guess the show here, if you want to reach out for any career advice or life advice, or just to have a conversation, or just even give a perspective from someone like myself, please feel free to reach out. My LinkedIn is Randall Ledet Jr. I'm on Twitter as well. So that's really all I have.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Randall. This was a lot of fun. I really appreciate your time.
I really loved it. All right.
All right, that's it for the Silicon Alley podcast. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode with Randall Ledet Jr. Please be sure to connect with him on Twitter and LinkedIn if you have not already. Also, make sure to follow and subscribe to the podcast so you get notified when a new episode drops every Friday. And please be sure to share this episode with others that you think might also get value from the conversation with Randall. I'm William Glass, CEO and co-founder of Ostrich. Thank you so much for sitting down with me today. Hope that you enjoyed the episode. That's it. Have a good one. Talk to you later.
You got no time to waste, but still you hesitate. Caught in a circle saying I'll never